And as we get into a conversation this morning around Budget 2025, Wanja Maina is the founder of the Hummingbird Center and a member of the Okoa Uchumi campaign. And she is in the hot seat this morning. Wanja, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Mzuri sana.
Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Good to have you here this morning.
I'm happy to be here.
Many things to discuss, many things to look into concerning Budget 2025. But let's kick it off, first of all, by welcoming you to the Situation Room with a proverb. Dennis will tell you where we are, and then we'd like to hear your interpretation of it.
Yes, Wanja, good morning.
Good morning.
So leo tuko Uganda. Yeah, Uganda, and it is the Pearl of Africa. Many reasons why it is called the Pearl of Africa. First of all, because all year round they receive a lot of rainfall, so it is a breadbasket for the region, and it's home to nearly half of the world's mountain gorillas. You know, so if you want to enjoy watching gorillas, just go to Uganda. As well as it is the source of the Nile River. You know, Nile River goes all the way to Egypt, and it's very important for the Egyptian food and agriculture and whatnot. And today's proverb is: a person who has not traveled thinks his mother is the best cook.
A person who has not traveled thinks his mother is the best cook. Well, I think figurative, literally, it just means you enjoy your ugali at your home. It's upon traveling to Uganda or other places where you find there is value-added ugali with cassava, with yams. And you go to West Africa, you find there is soft ugali made of yam. But I think Ndo is laughing. But now...
It's not soft, it's just pounded yam.
Pounded yam. Yeah. But now, the literal meaning, but figuratively, I think it means it is upon traveling, it is upon interacting with people from different cultural extractions, it is upon reading, it is upon what is it called? It's upon benchmarking that you realize how you do things in your country, how you do things in your home or in your culture is not necessarily the best, and there could always be new ways of doing things to embrace, new cultural ways of doing things, really. Yeah.
Absolutely. Always a new way to do things, for sure. Well, it seems as though in terms of budgeting and how we get things done, we seem to be doing the same things the same way and are kind of hoping for a different outcome. People have previously described this or defined this as insanity. But for the purposes of this conversation, let's see then what it can come out to be. The election 2022 was an election that was an economic one, and that everybody campaigned on an economic premise, stating that what was going to happen was that Kenya was going to be saved from the shackles of poverty, and that the economy was going to do, great somersaults and get us to the place where the country was then able to reap different benefits. And the hustler then was the currency that was going to be traded for votes. We heard so many things. Housing was going to be afforded to those who couldn't previously afford it. Mama Mboga was going to be able to do this. Border riders were going to then be able to. Essentially, the idea was that those who had essentially operated on the lower part of the totem pole were then going to be empowered to then live for themselves and also to contribute to the economy. Let's look at Budget 2025. 1,000 days in office in this relatively new administration is what is being marked today. As we look at the Budget 2025-2026, the question is this still towards the protection of the hustler?
1,000 days in office, really, and for those of us who have been around, we feel like it's 1 million years in office, really, because of the amount of poor governance, the amount of backwardness that we're experiencing. But I will just start by passing my condolences to the family of a young man who I believe is in the front page of the Standard, who was killed under mysterious circumstances. And just to go straight to your question and say that this budget, the budget estimates that we have for 2020 financial year 25-26 is not a reflection of the problems of the hustler. Allow me to single out two issues One is the issue of the school feeding program. Now, there has been a slash of a lot of money in millions, around 600, the money that is meant for the school feeding program. For those who have done the maths here and there, they estimate that 600 million can feed 50,000 children every day for this whole financial year.
Stop. Wait.
6 million.
Let's start again.
600 million.
600 million
is the amount of cuts that has been that have taken that are in this budget for the school feeding program. Now, if 50,000 children were given 1 meal a day using this amount of money, they could be fed for the next 1 year. Now, for those of us who have interacted with people of many economic means, we know that school feeding program is connected to children attending school. It's connected to children enjoying. You know, there are people who are poor in this country. There are children who are motivated by food to go to school. We've had teachers telling us that there are children, when they're given githeri or porridge or something, they eat a bit, they carry a bit to go home because their mother could probably be depending on that same food. So such kind of an indicator is not very pleasant for a country that is a country of high inequalities. There's a very huge inequality between the rich and the poor. So when you look at that, it doesn't look very nice. Something else that doesn't look very nice for the hustler is the issue of VAT on basic things like animal inputs, medication, and actually the fact that there's VAT on raw products that are used in making medication. It means people who have diseases will have to pay more for the medication. Now, in a country that has a funny healthcare system, in a country where the national government is always promoting SHA, yet health is a devolved function, I have never had a governor promoting SHA. I've never had a governor supporting anything to do with SHA. You start asking yourself, the people who have a lot of money interact with private facilities. The people who don't have money try to go to the public facilities. If there will be no medication or if there is a cost attached to it, we become a country where we saw a story in the media like two weeks ago in Gatondo, where a parent child died, a young child, because they could not get an ambulance or health services. It is this same country where we see wanton budgeting on some things that do not seem important, like renovations of State House, things like per diems on senior government officials, things that look wasteful. So your average Kenyan will be asking, is this budget for me really? Yeah.
It's we talk about, is this budget for me? And there is also the aspect of zero rated versus exempt, and you find farm inputs have been put at exempt as opposed to zero rated, and that would mean that the cost of producing food in the country would go up. And if the cost of production goes up for food, that means the average Kenyan will have to spend more to just buy food, as well as fact that now we even talk in terms of there is no money to fund exams and whatnot in this budget. And the Kenyan is asking, how do we go about it? But even while at it, Wanja, there is the aspect of public participation and Kenyans being involved in this budget making process. From where it is you sit, do you feel like Kenyans have been given an opportunity to play part and ball in the budget making process?
I'll just start saying that there's a young lady, her name was Rose. I think the last week the youth and the Gen Zs were doing the hashtag Free Rose. Yeah. She had attempted to help us to navigate the public participation using an IT situation where people could send their things and then some of the key things would be sent to the parliament. We saw what happened to her. She was arrested. She says she was harassed. She's a mother of 2. She slept in the cold for 4 nights. Her only crime, trying to make sense of this budget using IT and technology. She had made an app. For those of us who are just curious observers, we wondered, what is this so secretive about a budget, which is a public document? What is this so secretive about how I'm going to be taxed and how my money is going to be used, that a young lady whose ability to make technology and apps is being arrested for 4 days. I think one of the things about public participation, it's a conversation that we should embrace, and it's a pending conversation. Public participation, even at county level, is usually done as a way of ticking the box. It is done just for the sake of compliance. I can tell you for sure, if you go to some of these counties, people mobilize for public participation, the people they like. So they'll just say, MCA, leta watu wako 10, Ndu, leta watu wako 5, Dennis, leta watu wako 5. See, now we had a public participation. So it becomes like a formality because it's a constitutional requirement and not necessarily listening to the views of the many. If you really want to know that public participation is not taken seriously in Kenya, look at the financial year 2024-2025, the one that is coming to an end now. Even if you are new in Kenya, even if you live under a rock, you could tell that the mood of the country is, we are not happy with these proposals. What did the parliamentarians do? All of them, most of them passed it. You could tell that there was total disconnect between the voices of the people and the voices of their representative in the parliament. What am I saying? Sometimes it seems like the executive is very keen on passing some of these things. It doesn't look good on any government to have their intention to spend money and people rejecting them. It could be indicators of a failing government. So I think that's why they try very much to impose, like in this budget, they are making it to look a bit innocent. They are making it to look like we have heard you. But it's upon looking at some of these things with a toothpick that you realize it is not very innocent. So in my view, public participation is just a formality. They don't take the views of the people seriously. Otherwise, if they did, you could tell there could be some form of change.
Let's look at what it would look like if actually we saw that the hustler was taken into consideration, because that's essentially what you want to do in any kind of progressive economy, is that you want to make sure that the most vulnerable in any society then are being given a leg up in one way or another, right? So let's look at what it would look like had we seen that the hustler was front and center of an economy. What would we see if truly it had been upheld?
I'm of the view that some of the basics and some of the most important things in any country is health, education, social protection. Because I believe if people can be able to access health, and if the children and the young adults are able to get education and training, and if the poor and the marginalized are sheltered from the economic shocks, then that looks like a good country. But in Kenya, we have seen there was a big headline in the Standards barely a week ago. The big screaming headline was end of free primary education. Now, if you go to these Nairobis, I'm sure when you go to any upmarket area in Nairobi, generally there's always a slum or an informal neighborhood nearby.
Yes.
You can just see the impact of wasted potential of people. Like, have you ever seen brilliant women and you always hope that, I wish they were educated. Education cannot afford to be made to be an exclusive reserve of the rich. Education is an equalizer. For as long as you take away the free primary education, you are setting up yourself as a country for an onset of a lot of social vices. For those of us who have interacted with some of these issues, we know that education is a family planning. The more girls are in school, the more chances they're able to delay motherhood, and the more chances they're able to have children who are able to access nutrition. Education keeps students away from vices like use of drugs, stress. So for me, I think our education is not doing well. We've seen university students are not very happy with how things are moving. The other issue that is a big problem is health. When in other countries, and I less than 2 weeks ago, in the last week of May, I was in an island country called Mauritius. Now, if you go to Mauritius, and I experienced that, and I knew that this is an interesting country. Every time I go to an international airport or an airport, it is like it's an unwritten rule that if someone helps you with your bag, you give them a tip. the lady at the Mauritius airport was not very keen on a tip from me. So I wondered, okay, who would refuse a certain amount of dollars on a good afternoon? Now, I learned that in Mauritius, education is free for all. In Mauritius, health is free for all, even a foreigner. So if you go there coughing, nini, you're going to be given. Transport is highly subsidized for children, the elderly, the disabled, and there is also social housing. Now, what am I saying? In a country where health is such a big problem, in a country where people with sick children usually say, wacha alale, tuone vile atamka asubuhi. Why? Because they cannot afford medication. And now in a country that is not very keen on social protection and preventing people from the shocks of emergencies in their lives, that does not look like a country that is very keen on taking care of the welfare of the hustlers. And the hustlers are many. Most of the people in Kenya are in the informal economy. Most of the people in Kenya live day to day, hand to mouth. So I think a good economy and a good budget is the one that is not taxing people obnoxiously, so that they're able to do business, taking care of health, taking care of education, social protection, and just also the senior government officials to stop wanton wastage, really. They travel a lot. Some of these meetings they go to do abroad could easily be Zoom calls. In a place of technology, COVID taught us that we can have a big conference with Ndu in America. Dennis in
we had
Ethiopia.
presidents have a summit virtually. That was a great thing to see. Yeah.
That is it. But now if you see your country where all the MPs have gone to Ethiopia to dance because you have a candidate in the AU, you wonder who has funded that. Who has funded that kind of, in a country where there's no budget for free education, but every other weekend politicians are doing empowerment projects, giving beans, wheelbarrows, bicycles. You start wondering, where did the money come from?
There's a story here today where there's a parliamentary committee that is questioning why some government units are actually collectively spending more in paying rent. In this particular case, there's the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics and the Kenya Institute of Public Policy and Analysis, 300 million on rent annually, even as government office spaces remain vacant. My question is, when you're looking at a public debt from 8.7 trillion in 2002 to now 11.35 trillion. You tie the debt, you tie wastage. Are you able, in your report, to track wastage?
Well, I'll just start by saying that there's that kind of an attitude in people say, hizi ni pesa za gava. And then just lack of efficiency and effectiveness in terms of how they operate. There's a lot of opulence and there's a lot of you want to look like you're high up there. That is a psychology of people in government. So you'll find, and I think we have had these stories. I think there was a time there was some form of a conflict where some people had been told due to move from which office to go to the railways, and it was being seen to be like it is a downgrade. Yeah,
Office of Prime Cabinet Secretary.
Office of the cabinet, yet is a government office. So if it was up to them, they would have gone to the up markets of this world. And I think now it's just the issue of effectiveness and efficiency. And some of these things that how I see people operating, I usually ask myself, would they have done the same if it was the budget in their homes? Absolutely not. We have seen funny numbers like people buying laptops at 400k. A good laptop can be like 100k at most.
Even if you tried very hard and woke up very early, you could find one for
And even their output, they are not working very hard and very efficiently to justify that they have the best of laptops that cost 400k surely. But just to answer Dennis and talk about issues of wastage, it is some of these things that we see and we shiver. We've seen, there are some reports that the Office of the Auditor General usually share because she's the one actually who is able now to audit. For us, we can only see people traveling to America and we wonder why you need such a big delegation. But the Auditor General has constantly given us reports that are very alarming one side there was an expenditure of what, paying rent cumulative 300 million, in a country that has a lot of public buildings that can easily be lent at a subsidized cost. You start asking yourself, what can 300 million do for now a certain number of people? Why do we have people who are paying rent for 300 M, yet we have a budget cutting on school feeding program and eating food, and it's a basic need? I think that kind of a psychology, and I'm a Catholic. Bishop Mohoria talks about political hygiene. And we talk about political hygiene, I think political hygiene transcends beyond how we make fun of each other, calling each other cousins, to actually now trying to ask ourselves, is it worth it to pay 300 million? Is it important? And though, because we interact with some of these people who are in politics, who are our friends, they'll also tell you they cannot have meetings in the boardrooms of those places where they have 300 million. Why? Because there is no per diem. I can tell you, if they want to have a meeting, they usually go out of town. So beyond that 300 million that is paid to the one who is renting, any important meeting that involves a discussion will be held in Nakuru, Naivasha, Mombasa. Why? It's out of the station. This budget is actually moving the exemption of the taxes for the per diem from 2,000 to 10,000. So they will prefer to be away from the offices to do it, out of town. And it doesn't look very good.
The reason I ask this is there have been calls to do an independent debt audit. And we know where that conversation has gone. In 2013, the then Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich under Uhuru's administration announced austerity measures, and for the first time it almost felt like this is the first time we're actually seeing something significant happening. And the announcement, which was in the budget policy statement, was banning spending on a number of things. So one is office tea and snacks, chai, namandazi, fresh flowers, decorations. There was the newspaper subscriptions, lavish foreign trips, and workshops, the one you've just referred to, workshops and retreats in very high-end hotels. And that was part of a broader government effort to cut wastage by at least 50% of the revenue at the time. The question I'm asking is, because, we talk about these figures in a very interesting way. When you break 300 million, as an example, into what 300 million can actually do, we're going to have a different conversation. My question is it that we don't have a way to track these wastages in government? And that's why it's easy to just get away with a lot of these things, despite saying, you know what, I'm going to cut tea in this office for the next 5 years. But there is no tracking. How much tea was being consumed before? How much tea are we consuming now? Are you able to track any form of wastage in government?
Am I able to track any form of wastage? Well, maybe I may not have a direct answer. I still believe that Office of the Auditor General is the one who is actually in charge of that kind of a task. But then again, Kenyans, we hear these things. For example, we also know that austerity is also used and this conversation is actually speaking to the broader issues of macroeconomics, where we see now influences of the Britain institutions of this world. Whenever there are discussions around austerity, they usually target the bottom. You have too many people you have employed. Let's shed off some people. So they'll shed off people in the low cadre jobs. You're talking about austerity, let's cut tea, mandazi and all. With all honesty, tea and mandazi looks like a very small budgetary voted compared, for example, to the kind of bloated delegations that go to Europe for 5 days or 7 days.
Or if you have one department in a ministry that has 9 vehicles, of which that are all of the SUV nature.
Correct. So austerity and those kind of conversations, they are always being very they're always being very much on the surface. And I might also say that whenever there are those discussions around austerity, the people who are affected most are the vulnerable.
Yes.
Because even women are the ones who work in low cadre jobs that are not very well paying, the young people, entry-level positions. So I feel like the discussion on austerity should move beyond issues of flowers and tea to look at the top, because that's where big monies are spent. However, the Office of the Auditor General has not been having a very good time, because she speaks the truth. There is even a time where she was a whole discussion in Parliament when she talked about SHA and that kind of funny thing around the systems. So you can also tell that the country where the MPs are the ones who are supposed to oversight and protect us, some of us believe they have been captured. So now we are left with the Office of the Auditor General that is being bold, but now there is something that they want to do with her office to cut her claws. So the question therefore is, who are the people who are supposed to defend us?
It's a good question, but we also then see that there's a bill before Senate right now that is asking for the Auditor General to do more than just report. But that bill has actually been brought about by members of the Senate saying, you know what, we are then saying expand the powers of the Auditor General beyond reporting and recommending, then also then, bring in an investigative arm. Open up the powers towards investigation. As we talk about these things, there's the paper of it, Wanja, isn't it? That there's the paper, there's all sorts of policy documents. There's the Public Finance Management Act. There is the Office of the Auditor General. There's the Office of the Controller of Budget. There are all these policies and offices that have been put in place to ensure that then these activities that the nation involves itself in from September, for example, in terms of budget making, and the things that you do as a result of that are actually established, number one, and that they're practiced, and then you keep according to mandate. They are there. However, for me that's the vehicle and it's the nuts and bolts, but the fuel to get this thing moving is will. And I think that's where I see the problem is, that we don't have the fuel to get this caboose moving. And we can talk about it. We talk about it all the time. We talk about budget 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. Here we are, another one, 2025, 2026. And we're saying that the very thing that we ran elections on, telling people that you were going to safeguard, protect, and progress the livelihoods of Kenyans, we're saying it hasn't happened. And somehow we're okay. We seem to be okay with it, that it hasn't happened. You told the nation for months on end that this is what you were going to do. Yesterday, the president was at a church service and he said, you know what? I am doing everything that I can. I will continue to do everything that I can. I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that Kenya succeeds. He said it yesterday again. But would we not see the manifestation of that promise?
If actually maybe the question should also be how we measure that success that he's aspiring. But if you go to most of these estates and most of these town, the shops are getting closed every day. If you go to the estates, you'll see a person has started a small business. After a few months, they are not there. If you go to town, I'm told things are doing so badly that the way people are being told to do a deposit for like 3 months, do down payment, goodwill. Yeah. Nowadays, it's like they are so desperate that they just want you to first come and occupy. So therefore, when it comes to success and how people are faring, it has to be felt by the vibrance of the economy. No, the thing about the economy, and that's why they always make it look like a very exclusive discussion, is that the economy, let's say for example, there's a Kenyan whose income is like to say 30K. If there are a lot of taxes and things are getting worse, how it affects Dennis, for example, is if that Kenyan, maybe after every 2 weeks, they go for a nail treatment, the women go for the facial treatment. Now, if you realize that your money is shrinking, what you do is that you stop using your money on some things that are seen to be luxurious. So if I used to go to your hotel to eat a pizza, I want to go. If I used to make my nails after every 2 weeks, I'll make my nails after every 4 weeks. So the very nature of some of these big macroeconomic issues around the influence of these big institutions that are outside of Kenya and the kind of conditionalities they give us is now reflected in how your average Kenyan is going to spend their money, the little that they have. Needless to say also, Kenya is a country of black tax. Most of these young people who are employed, the ones that are seen to be doing well, they'll tell you that they pay for the education of their younger siblings, their sick mom, their old relative, and the child in the village whom they give birth outside of the wedlock. Nauko is depending on them for 5K a month. So at any given time, the money has a lot of needs. Remember, we are a country without social protection. You know, in other countries, if you're old up or 65, the government has helped you by giving you a certain amount of money. So if you are a young working youth in Nairobi, you are the social protection for your village. So therefore, this does not look like the promise of the hustler. And you know, they whip the emotions of the hustler just to get their numbers. But on the ground, it doesn't look very well. And there are people who have argued that Kenya does not have a money problem. It has a wastage problem and an expenditure problem. And I do agree. Remember, every other day the governors are always crying, our money sijui imefanya nini, our money sijui imefanya nini. So those of us now who know that Kenya is our form of governance is devolved, you start asking ourselves, if the governor is crying because of lack of the money from the government, I'm sure the moment they get money, they'll be worried of whether to pay the staff who are about to strike, pay these expensive rents. And you know, sometimes you also hear stories, you wonder, you'll find that if it's a governor, for example, in a rural county, they also, even though they have a well-furnished office in the county, they also have a private office in a market area in Nairobi. So when priorities becomes, things are pushed, the people at the bottom of the pyramid are the ones who are likely to just,
You know, you mentioned something to do with the priority, and here we are discussing about the budget. You look at what one would say would be the most important things: education, healthcare, security, food would go into being a priority for the country. But here we are today saying how we do not have funds for education. Exams, parents will have to go deeper into their pocket. What does that do to the millions and millions of children in the country? We talk about healthcare that is still struggling. Yet, if you look at this very same budget, we see that the renovations at State House and all these other offices are taking place. There are reports of a new jet that is supposed to be bought, you know. We also have reports of new vehicles that need to be bought, curtains 1 million. And one just goes to ask, our priority when it comes to this budget, is it misplaced? Is it in the right place?
It is misplaced. It is tone deaf. You know, the reason why we had the Gen Z protesting, we remember that what triggered them was how the MPs were making fun of them when they are making their contributions in the budget that was not reflective of their feelings. Sijui, they wanted to digital tax. Some Gen Zs are saying, you people have not offered us employment, so we are in Kenya, but we are making content, we are working virtually abroad, and what have you. The budget that we have and the people who engage in this kind of processes are tone deaf. They do not want, I think they live outside of, or they are so comfortable to listen to the problem of the poor who are down. I remember there was a story that I'm sure I heard it in one of these morning shows. They say that if some people heard that you didn't eat, they'll ask you, Kwani you didn't feel like cooking or to order in? Because they will wonder, how lazy are you not to eat?
Not to eat, yeah.
They'll ask, for those of us who are trying to lose weight, they'll ask you, when you go intermittent fasting, you are just weird, you know. But the truth of the matter is that Kenya is a country of inequalities. And if you look at now some of these issues, social issues, and one of the things that we ought to start doing now is to connect these economic issues and politics to the lived realities of people. Now, take an example. In Kenya, 38% of households are single-parent led. Now, if the 38% of households are single-parent led, it is just factual that single-parent led households are generally poorer because of relying on one income. Now, even though they could be single parent led with a dad, single dad or single mom, we also know that most of the households are single mom led. Now, how the politicians are behaving when they don't listen to the issues of the taxes, how these budgets will pass, will influence the parent. Now I'm imagining that kind of a household that is poorer, they rely on public education. The parent is worried about lunch, so they know lunch is sorted kwa sababu mtoto wako kwa shule. So they are only worried about breakfast and dinner. And it's upon listening to people, and these budget processes should also humanize people. There are children who don't eat a balanced diet. You listen to people, they just say mtoto takes tea and a bun. That is not a balanced diet for a child who is growing. But now, because we have been put on a perpetual survival mode, people even don't care about balanced diet. They just care about food.
There's something in the stomach, essentially. So we're talking about that people are not hungry.
It. Even I'm told in some homes that are even more poorer, it's like the mom looks like they are cooking something so that kids get tired of eating and they sleep. This is still Kenya. And I wish our leaders and our parliamentarians, some of these representatives, they are representative of some of the poorest rural constituencies. And therefore, their voices should be louder to talk about the welfare of their people. Take an example, Andrew. We have been relying a lot, and we have now to even look at the global issues. We have been relying a lot for health from aid agencies. Donald Trump comes and says, USAID money will not be given to these developing countries. You know what that means? That means the country, because it is a job of the government to give the people public goods like education, water, what. You had put the life of your citizens in the hand of donor agencies. Fair enough, we are in a global village, but it's not the job of the American people to treat your people who live positively with HIV. So what does that do? Trump comes and he's tired, he wants to take care of his people. Within one week or 2 weeks or 1 month, there is no money that is coming to your country. Yet a lot of your health projects had been relying on international agencies. What does that mean? That means you have to know where to get the ARTs and the ARVs for your people. And what does that also mean? That if you're making your budget, that should be reflected in how you are doing the health budgeting. But for those of us who are looking at the budgets, there is no additional money given to the National AIDS Program, which is a program by the government to take care of the people who live positively with AIDS, for example. We also know that people who live positively also now interact with the healthcare quite a lot. So the question is, what is the government intending to do with their 1.4 million people who live positively with HIV and other situations around health if you have not increased the money in the budget for the healthcare? I think these issues are very local if you look at them closely. But then again, you'll see now broadly now kuju, there's a lot of emphasis on estimates that are, and by the way,
estimates that are, I need
the
to finish
budget estimates that you can hardly probably pinpoint nicely. For example, if you say an increase in state house renovations, now we'll start by saying, let's remove the colonial roof, let's put a flat roof. Tomorrow we'll say, now these mabatis are bad for the climate change. There are things now where it's places that are easy to get money. And we also know that we are a country of kickbacks and funny stuff like those. But no, you had also mentioned around issues of the proposal in the Senate around the office of the Auditor General.
Yes.
And for me, I usually say, Kenya, we have enough laws. Our constitution is enough. Why? Of course, we have to always develop laws as a way of improving our welfare, but the constitution is clear. Provide things for public goods, promote the devolution, promote prudence use of resources. So if there's prudence use of resources, there's no even money to steal or even money to waste. So I think those are the issues.
And I think I think that's it. That there is money to steal or to waste. There is. It is available. The thing, though, is that if we live by the rule of law, then we don't steal or waste or misplace, that we don't, and then it is not a brick and mortar issue, but that it becomes a more subjective issue, and that we're all having conversations within ourselves to say that yes, it is there, I can, but because I realize that the issues around nationalism and patriotism and just doing the right thing, I'm going to hold those things sacrosanct, right? But we seem to have we don't it's a suggestion more of anything else. The rule of law and, abiding by it is a suggestion. If the wind blows in a certain direction that day and you're feeling okay, then maybe I will do it. But we don't live by that. We don't hold those things dear. And so we keep saying, what are the solutions? What are the things that we must apply? And I still find myself gravitating towards, then everybody needs to have a conversation with themselves, right? Because if we did hold the rule of law up there in terms of priority, if we did talk about integrity and working within certain lines and ideologies, then for me, all of these things fall in place. Then you won't have a budget whereby you're looking at how can I make a buck or two. You won't even have to think about whether you should educate your children or not. You will not have a conversation about should we make this health thing work. It'll just happen because it's the right thing to do. So should we be shifting our conversations? Because it seems that the things that we complain about on a daily basis, we started this morning complaining, it really soured my heart. We complained this morning about how we shouldn't kill people. It seems to me that it's a no-brainer that you shouldn't have to think about that. It seems that you have certain amounts of Kenya shillings that you should be sorting the country. You shouldn't have to think about whether you should educate your children or treat your sick. You shouldn't have to think about those things. And yet, we find ourselves having to think about it all the time, that should we or should we not? And then should we make a law that will hold somebody responsible if they don't? Well,
so like if you apply for these two government things, these two boards, I've been involved like in a board here and there. You're told, bring, they're called Chapter 6 documents, EACC clearance, DCI, money for the help, what.
Yeah.
Therefore, it means from the onset, they're telling you, welcome to this government process or work. And we are not, corruption is not a corruption-free zone. So it looks like there's a lot of cosmetics around it, or they aspire, but it's not on the ground. You talk about some of these things, like for example the story that is in the front page of the Standard. We are talking about killing people. Kenya is 82% Christians. Now I think the commandment that we talk about in a big way is thou shalt not kill. So you wonder, are we still Christians as we profess? But for me, I think these issues are so many and they are so layered. For example, the voters and the quality of people they choose.
Yes.
For those of us who might have interacted with the political process, we know that the voters really love money and the elections in Kenya are capital intensive. There was a report by a group of people, I think they're called Westminster something. They say that the average amount of money that you need to vie to be a member of parliament is 20 million. Now, for you to be a person who can spend 20 million, we know that you must have an extra amount of money that does not come from your savings, because I don't believe you can just decide to dish out your savings of 20 million.
Kuna pesa ya maziwa na mboga.
That is it.
Yeah.
So now, I think now if we are to look at this issue in a very holistic way, we also have to start asking the software of the voter. You voter, when you are looking for a representative in the parliament or in the senate or in the county assembly, what goes on in your head? Then we'll say, get the right leaders who are able to solve your things. But now on these issues of public finance management, I think first is just the parliamentarians who are already there to know that basically, and I remember when the Gen Z went to the parliament, even though there was a lot of painful stories around it, we have seen documentaries, I think for me, the symbolic nature of that revolution, if I were to use that word, was people saying, you parliamentarians, you are disturbing us, you are not listening to us, we have come to represent ourselves. Because a parliament is a very important, national treasure. So the parliamentarians, one, should just be sensitive to the needs of the people. Public participation should be seen to be a fact-finding mission, a listening tour to the people. They tell you this and that. But then again, I also think the executive, and particularly the president, he sets the tone. Now, we're in a country where we are back to these roadside declarations. You remember, like when you went to a church in Thika Road, he just said, nimefurahi nitawapea 20 million. For a person who is just seated there, you'll wonder, 20 million will be removed from a certain vote head that was meant to do something else to come to be given to a church. what are they doing? A church is not producing anything. They are not educating anybody. And then now,
sold, man.
the next time you go to where the president, you dance for him nicely, he becomes happy with you and your county, he gives you 500 million. Where was it budgeted to? Because ideally, the way they save money should follow all functions, or the reason why you engage in budgeting is attaching certain kind of priorities to money. So every time you hear that there is a money that has been given out of the excitement of the executive when they visit a certain place, you should start asking yourself, so does that mean money for school feeding program has come out? Those are really the issues.
These are the issues, and even as our time comes to a head here and we're looking at, those are the issues that will we then have an issue-based budget in the future? This one is out. I mean, for all intents and purposes, we're already out of the blocks for this. But will we then have an issue-based budget? Is it possible for nations to be able to do that, and for us to actually be able to then interrogate and question, but based on fact and not feeling? So to have these conversations is important that we do, and thank you for being here for us to be able to do that. Wanja Maina is the founder of the Hummingbird Center and a member of the Okoa Uchumi campaign, has been our guest this hour as we look in some of these pertinent issues. Budget days are coming, and as we continue to have the conversations, it'll be interesting to see how this is all played out. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
And good morning.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.